Hi, my name's Bronwen and I work for Off the Record. If you check out our website and all our social media online, there's lots more really cool and interesting ways that you can look after your mental health. We'll be putting out loads more in the coming weeks, so if you have any suggestions, please get in touch. But today I am going to talk to you about another aspect of resilience and how we can develop it. So we've already talked about developing emotional awareness and regulation, and in the last video I talked about impulse control. This one I'm going to be talking a little bit about something called realistic optimism. So realistic optimism is us being able to take a glance at our situation, be able to evaluate it realistically, and then be able to put a positive or optimistic spin on it. So thinking about the things that we are in control of, the things that we're not in control of, and what we can actually do to really look after ourselves. It's my particular favourite one because I think there's quite a damaging message out there about if you just have like a positive attitude, that somehow you can fix everything. And clearly that's just not actually true. Some people are in situations which are genuinely really hard, really bad, and actually someone coming along and saying, all you need is positivity can be really insulting and actually very unhelpful. I mean, if you had a friend coming to you who was seeking support and you were only to say to them, just be more positive, or on the flip side, say something like, lots of people have it worse than you, neither of those statements actually help that person at all. In fact, they probably just make that person feel worse and less likely to kind of seek support in the future. So realistic optimism is a really important concept and it's really useful, especially at a time like this. I'm going to break it down a little bit. So to begin with, thinking about the realistic part of it, being realistic is being able to take a look at our situation, where we are, what's happening, and really evaluating it and knowing what the truth is, what is the reality of the world that we're living in right now. Now, that's clearly very important at the moment because we need to keep ourselves up to date with developments and ways to keep ourselves healthy and also to protect others. Super important. What we don't want to do is to end up going down a rabbit hole of information online or spending a lot of time dwelling on all the really kind of negative aspects of the situation, because that in the end is actually going to develop a slightly unrealistic picture of where we are. So what I think are sometimes useful tips is to make sure that we're checking in maybe once a day with what the news is saying, having a look at a couple of reliable sources of information, and just getting a handle on what the up-to-date information is of the reality that we're in right now. Now, reliable sources of information is super important. So things to look out for is, is this information coming from an expert in a particular area? Is this information coming from someone who really knows what they're talking about? And also, is the stuff that they're saying backed up by other people who also are reliable and have expertise? So that's really useful. But then once we've got that information, once we've got that picture of what the reality is, then we need to kind of look after ourselves and do a bit of self-care as well. So keeping up to date, knowing what our reality is, very, very important. The other thing that's really useful for developing the optimism side of things is if we can look at past experiences that we've had that maybe were quite tricky or were a hard time or was an experience where we went through that was really tough. If we can look at that time and work out actually what were the things that worked, what were the things that helped, what were the things that got us through, what did we learn about ourselves and how did we grow as a person from that experience? Now, doing this is really helpful because humans are quite bad at evaluating risk anyway. So we tend to focus on the worst case scenario and think about that. When we actually look at past experiences and what was positive about it, whilst at the same time recognising how hard that experience was, that can help us then to see into the future how we can deal with current situations that we're going through. So it's this idea that we can actually grow. We're not fixed. So realistically optimistic people think that they can actually make things happen for themselves. They also recognise that there will be challenges and there will be obstacles and that at times it will be really hard. And that is the reality of it. But if they stick with it and they go through those obstacles and they do the hard work, that actually there may be a positive outcome, an optimistic outcome at the end of it. The other thing is that realistically optimistic people are quite good at expecting the unexpected. So we might have a plan, we might have an idea, we might have a concept of how we're going to behave in a particularly difficult situation, and we might have a couple of tools that we've thought about from past experiences. But realistically optimistic people also will know that there will be all sorts of things that will be thrown up in different challenging situations. And actually, being a bit flexible and being able to kind of work with that situation and adapt is also super, super useful. So these are some of the ways that we can kind of develop our realistic optimism. Sometimes it's also really good to just, I mean, I know it said at the start, this idea that if you say to someone, well, lots of people have it worse than you, can be really unhelpful, and that is true. But sometimes also, if we can look at our reality and develop our empathy when looking at other people's realities and what experiences other people are going through, that can also be a really useful building block for developing our knowledge of what reality is, but also how we can work towards an optimistic outcome. And the final thing that I'd like to say about realistic optimism is there is this huge part of it that is about self-care. So people who are optimistic, people who think that they can make things happen, people who feel that they have some level of control over themselves and how they grow and how they feel, they're also good at actually putting themselves in a place where they're best able to actually do that work. So if we know that the reality is it's going to be hard, that there are going to be obstacles, that it's going to be challenging, then it makes sense that we need to be in the best possible shape that we can be to be able to deal with those challenges. So I know I talked in impulse control about how we cope with stress and with kind of fear and all of those sorts of things. If the ways that we're coping with fear and stress and our impulse control is kind of not that great, then we might be using quite unhealthy tools to be able to deal with the current situation. And that will then put us in a particular place where we're not as well, we're not as fit and able to be able to deal with the challenge. If we can develop healthy and sustainable coping tools, they're actually going to put us in a really good place, then that's going to be great. If you think about it, it's a bit like someone training to do a marathon. Now, you wouldn't just expect to turn up at the start of a marathon and just start running, because, I mean, like if I tried to do that, it would go really quite badly wrong. I am not a runner, and I have not done weeks of training or thought about it or kind of set myself the different tasks that you need to do to think about the mental challenge. But if a marathon runner has done the training, has gone through the physical training and the mental training, and they start on that start line, even though things might go wrong along that course, they will be able to adapt and to deal with it. Having a realistic, optimistic approach to the whole thing. So this looks like it's going to be a marathon. So we need to pace ourselves, we need to look after ourselves, we need to check in with reality as much as it feels good for us. And when it stops feeling good, then maybe we need to switch off and actually do some of the self-care activities that we've already talked about. I hope that gives you something to think about. It's just another thing that we can develop and look at. I've particularly enjoyed watching Elle and Jacob's videos about rethinking your routine, which also would really, really put us in a good place to develop our realistic optimism and to feel in control of some of the things that we can do. If there's anything else that you'd like to hear us talk about or to see, get in touch. I'm really enjoying doing these, and I'd just like to say that I am not always good at taking my own advice. So doing these videos is helping me to remind me what actually works and what will help to look after my own resilience, and I hope it's helping some of you too. Thanks very much.